My name is Hala Dabusi, and I am a business coach with Action Coach. I help business owners grow their business, work less, and earn more. And part of the burning questions that people have is, now I have to have all my employees come back. What do I need to do? That's why Alexis is here to help us answer all these questions. So, Alexis, why don't you introduce yourself first? Tell us what you do, who do you help, and then let's dig deep into some of the burning questions that the employers have.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Hala, for having me. I'm Alexis James. I'm managing partner at Workwise Law. I've been practicing employment law for 16 years, and 10 of those years I spent on the plaintiff side, representing employees who were suing their companies for wrongful termination, disability discrimination, harassment. And after spending those years working hard on plaintiffs' behalf, I really felt like my heart belonged with these small business owners who were not necessarily bad actors. They just were ignorant of what the laws were in California. You know, California is such a difficult state to do business in. The laws are constantly changing. That's been exacerbated with COVID. And I really just wanted to help the business owners understand their regulations, understand how to comply, because in that way I'm protecting both the employer and the employee. If we know the rules, if we play by the rules, then we're out of the courts, and there's less headache and there's less money spent in the court system.
Exactly. So, we don't want to be there.
No, we don't. We don't. And California now has such a backlog of cases. Yeah. In LA County, there's 300,000 cases waiting to go to trial. Oh, so goodness. We really need to resolve our workplace issues safely and effectively now, before we have to spend time in the courts.
Exactly. Good point you bring up, that there are, so many regulations that the business owners of today's world need to be aware of in order to avoid, going to court. And honestly, I feel like in the past year, there were so many regulations due to the pandemic that we've been living in for the past forever, what seems like 15, 16 months, who's counting? So what are the new regulations, especially now that people are getting more and more vaccinated? Some employers are requiring employees to go back to work. So tell us exactly, what do employers need to know in order to let and help people and their employees go back to work?
Okay, well, there's so many regulations to keep up with, and they're constantly changing. And I think that there is a slowdown between the results we're getting from people getting vaccinated and then what the county and city level is requiring of businesses. So there's still a lot of regulations that business owners need to comply with, even if a lot of their staff are getting vaccinated, or if they are working modified schedules, some people working half at home, some people working in the office. So you still have to know those regulations, and then most importantly, communicate them to your employees, because employees need to feel safe when they come back to whatever job site they're now being called back to. They want to know that the employer has looked at the regulations, studied them, and put them into place, and that they're going to enforce them. Because if an employee is going to put their own health at risk to come and do their job, that's okay. They'll make that decision if that's right for them, but they want to know that they're being protected. So the first thing that the state is requiring is that every business have a written prevention plan in place. Mm-hmm. And that sounds onerous, but they have given us some tools to get this done. Okay. So the Cal-Osha, which is the California Safety Agency that's overseeing how businesses, run themselves with regard to COVID, they put out a model prevention program. And it's a long document. It walks the business owner through all the hazards that they have to identify in the workplace. Things as small as having food bins where everyone's sticking their hands into, get the chips in the office.
Yeah.
Got to remove that. It's things that we pass every day and we don't think of. And then the larger items, like how many people are you going to sit in a conference room? Is there a flow of traffic where maybe you can make something one directional as opposed to everybody passing each other or congregating in a small hallway? you also have to identify what's going to happen if someone does test positive in the workplace. There's a lot of compliance regulations in terms of getting the rest of your staff notified if they had close contact with that person, sending them for testing, excluding them from the workplace for a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference. I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but
no, it's perfect. It's perfect. No, we need to know all these things.
There's a difference between quarantine and isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, in LA County, there's different orders. A quarantine is if you've been exposed to somebody with COVID and you go into quarantine, and hopefully you don't become symptomatic yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but you stay away from others because you've been exposed. Isolation has to do with if you are showing symptoms of COVID or you've tested positive for COVID.
Right.
And, you know, the regulations are changing again about how long you need to stay out. And the CDC has guidance that they've given the country, but the state and the county level can be stricter than what the CDC is requiring. So there's a lot of misinformation. You know, when the CDC makes a big announcement, everybody thinks, oh, great, well, now I can be outside with my mask off if I'm vaccinated.
Yes.
You still have to look at your local regulations to see if they match with what the CDC is saying.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, so many things, so many criterias and moving parts and so many things to take into consideration, but there are guidelines and people have access to those guidelines, and obviously they can come to you to make sure that whatever they have in place is legal or not. So let me ask you some kind of I know for a lawyer it's very hard to do some rapid fire questions.
I'll try my best.
But try your best. So, as an employer, can I force my employee to get vaccinated?
Okay, so the EEOC said that yes, employers can mandate vaccines, but I can tell you from a practical standpoint, I am not recommending that for any of my clients.
Okay.
I think it is better at this point to encourage your employees to get vaccinated. But it brings up all sorts of legal issues if your employee comes back to you and says, no, I don't want to get vaccinated. If you were to have a mandatory policy, you still have to make accommodations for anyone who has a disability, who feels that getting the vaccine might exacerbate their disability, or if they have a sincerely held religious belief. Okay. And so the employer has to go through what's called an interactive process. I know you know what that is, Hala, as an HR professional.
Yes.
You know, it's a fancy word for a formal discussion about how you can accommodate somebody. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So are you going to force them not to come into your workplace if they don't get vaccinated? Are you going to terminate if you have a mandatory policy and they refuse to get vaccinated and don't fall into one of these exceptions?
Yes.
It raises a lot of thorny issues. There's going to be litigation about this. So I think at this point, while the vaccines are only approved for emergency use, it's really in the best interest of the employer to encourage them, but not to mandate them.
Oh, fantastic. And my next question is, can employers enforce coming back to the office, or do they have to offer remote access or remote employment for their employees?
Great question. So as long as the employer is complying with the safety regulations, they can require that their employees come back. But again, subject to discussions. If someone has a disability, if they're over 65, if they have underlying health conditions, they might feel very uncomfortable coming back to the office, and the employer can require them to get a certification from their doctor, not as to what their diagnosis is, but just to certify this person does have underlying health conditions, and we feel that it would not be prudent for them to come back to the office at this time. And then the employer goes through the reasonable accommodation process of, can we allow them to continue to telework? Or can we place them in a portion of the office that doesn't have much contact with other people? Can we limit the hours that they have contact with others? So there's a lot of things that an employer can consider at this time, but ultimately, yes, they can require their staff to come back so long as their industry and local guidance says that it's okay.
Very good. And finally, one last question. If employers are giving their employees the option to telework or to be 100% remote, are there any additional stuff that they need to take into consideration for those employees that traditionally used to be in the office and now they are working from home?
So your workers' compensation does cover employees that work from home, and you want to make sure that you have that coverage. I think it's really important to put a telework agreement into place, which specifies that the rules apply just as if you were in the office. So you have to take your break periods, your meal periods, you have to accurately record your time. We'll have meetings about productivity. We will supply you with the necessary business tools to get your job done. So, the labor code requires reimbursement, reasonable reimbursement for things like internet and cell phone use if the employee is doing that work from home. So these are some of the things that you should consider and put it into writing.
Oh, wow.
Communicate.
Exactly. That's the golden rule. Just keep communicating. And the same way, 15 months ago or 16 months ago, when this whole thing started, everyone was trying to figure out how to work from home. Now everyone seems to be figuring out how to work back in the office. So, but my advice and recommendation is don't do it alone. Get professional advice. And so if anybody watching this want professional advice from Workwise Law, what is the best way to contact you, Alexis?
Thank you, Hala. The best way is my email. So that's Alexis, Alexis, at workwiselaw.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and I give a free 20-minute consult.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome. And what differentiates Alexis and her law firm from other law firms is that you guys are not only a law firm, but also you are an HR firm at the same time. So you can help with any other HR related stuff, right?
Correct. We give it what I consider on-call advice. So if you have a difficult issue with an employee, or you're not sure how to implement a regulation, give us a call. We'll answer your question as quickly as we can.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Alexis, for sharing these Workwise advice, and I look forward to having you in the future when things change and when we have more updates on how to work best as employers. Thank you so much, Alexis.
Thank you so much.